Well, hello and welcome to Friends and Neighbors. I'm Sherry Tatum, one of your hosts for the day, but I have my wonderful, precious friend Ginger here with me today. And it's always such a pleasure to have her, but you need to go get you a cup of coffee, right, and settle in.
That would be good.
We've got a great guest today. We've got Miss Becky Harling, and I'm going to read a little bit about it. She is a seasoned Bible teacher and a relationship expert who understands loneliness and has found deep connections both with God and with others. She's written a book right here. It's called Cultivating Deeper Connections. And, you know, I think, Becky, welcome first. Isn't it about loneliness? A lot about loneliness? Because aren't we kind of like in an epidemic of people being lonely? So give me a little insight about your book. What's in
there? And so in 2023, the Surgeon General came out with a report, actually, that we are now in an epidemic of loneliness, and it is affecting our health. So to feel isolated or lonely for extended time is as bad as smoking 15 packs of cigarettes a day. It's leading to heart disease and increased risk of stroke, because here's the thing, we weren't designed to be isolated. We were designed in the image of God, who is a relational God. And so we're designed for relationship with Him and with others.
Well, you know, I'm dealing with that to some extent. My husband died last year with Alzheimer's.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. And I just had a dear friend, her husband died about 3 or 4 weeks ago with Alzheimer's. And I texted her and I said, how are you doing? I'm here for you if you need me. And this is what she texted back, so sad. She said, as overburdened as I was and as overwhelmed as I was with taking care of my husband with Alzheimer's, she said, it doesn't compare to the loneliness. She said, Sherry, I'm so lonely. He's been dead 3 or 4 weeks. And I told her, I said, you will be. You'll work through it with the goodness of God. I said, just stay with the Lord. That's the only way you'll get through it. But give me some insight about that, Becky. What could I tell her to help her? And I also have another friend whose husband's died, and she's lonely. Alzheimer's again.
You know, I think you did the best thing because you offered empathy. You essentially told her, your feelings make sense to me. And I think sometimes we run the risk of trying to fix somebody's feelings of loneliness. Excuse me. And there's no fix for it, you know. So by offering empathy, she felt connected to you. And she now knows she can reach out to you again. And I personally feel like that's beautiful. There's no way you could fix her loneliness. You know that as a widow yourself. And so offering empathy basically says, your feelings make sense to me.
And they do. And they do. But what I'm trying to understand is, we live in a world where there's so much to do. You have the television, you have social media, you know, you have all these things you can volunteer for and things you can do. But, you know, a long time ago, there was a song called Loneliness is the number one, what is it, feeling in the world, something to that effect.
Yeah, I do remember
and about being lonely. So why are we so lonely? Why can't we meet people and get out and do things and be involved?
You know, I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think over the last 50 or so years, one of the biggest reasons is we've become so addicted to hurry as a culture. So we're always in a rush to the next appointment. And so we don't have time for people like we used to, you know. I remember going into New York City and spending a week with my grandmother every summer. And every single day at 3 o'clock, she had a friend over for coffee and coffee cake. It was Aunt Isabel. Now, Aunt Isabel was not really my aunt. To this day, I don't actually know who she is. But she was my grandmother's friend. And every day at 3 o'clock they had coffee and coffee cake. Well, I look at our world right now and we don't have time for that, right?
Yeah.
Because we're always in a rush. And then there's technology. And technology serves a purpose. It's wonderful. However, people are
it's not
becoming
people.
addicted to technology.
And young people today don't even know how to communicate because they communicate through technology.
Yes.
So that has closed that door of communication. But don't you think loneliness can sometimes be prevented by getting out and doing for others?
Yes,
Being
absolutely.
involved.
Being involved,
Yeah.
just going helping somebody, get your mind off of yourself, turns that door.
But you know too, Ginger, we talked about before, going to church, being with your brothers and sisters in the Lord, going to church and cultivating that and being involved with people at your church is a wonderful venue, I think. And volunteering for different programs outside, you know?
Yes.
Do you think that's
Absolutely, I do. I think during the pandemic, people got a little bit comfortable with staying home, watching church in their jammies, eating, drinking coffee.
Yeah.
And, that was okay for a season. But now it's time to get back to church and be with people. When we're together as a congregation and we're worshiping the Lord, you have that feeling that we're in this together and it's less lonely. And then volunteering, serving others is a great way to connect. If you're feeling lonely, go volunteer at a children's hospital, and offer to pray with parents who have a kid in there maybe who's struggling with cancer, or read books to the kids or something, but get involved because Jesus calls us to love others. And that's a great way to do it.
Well, he surrounded himself, with the disciples.
Yes.
He was very friendly oriented. He liked people around. And when he spoke to the masses.
Yes, he did.
So, I think being isolated, and when you do that, when like a death, people are prone to isolate themselves. Well, that leads to me, sometimes I would think, a disconnect with even God.
Yes.
Because you've sequestered yourself away. You don't want anybody telling you anything. You've heard it. You've been through it.
Right.
And you just want to be by yourself. But then that can lead to other, like I said, disconnect with God.
Yeah, it really can. And if we look at the life of Jesus, he had a beautiful rhythm to his life, right? He had solitude, which is not the same as isolation.
Yes.
He had time with God the Father in solitude. He had time with the multitude, like you said, crowds of people.
Yes.
He had 12 great friends in the disciples. And then he had his inner circle of Peter, James, and John, who were the closest to him.
Yes.
And that's a beautiful rhythm for our lives, I think. We do need times of solitude where we're really connecting with God the Father, because that's always the place where we're going to feel most deeply loved.
Right.
I am sure you have a similar rhythm, but every morning I love to start my morning with a cup of coffee, down on my knees, listening to worship music and praising God for who he is, because then I feel his presence and I know I'm deeply loved. Then when you come from that place, then you're able to reach out to others and make them feel deeply loved.
Absolutely. That's what you have to, after someone passes, like your husband or your wife, you have to get over the times like Roy would come down, and every morning, I don't care what I was doing, he would find me, hug me, ask me how my night was, did I sleep well, I love you, what are we going to do today? You have to find ways to get beyond needing that, because that was imperative to me. I loved that. I loved that he loved me. And we want to be loved. We want to be with, Jesus said, well, in the Bible it says it's not good for man to be alone.
Yes.
Alone. And that's why he made Adam a helpmate. He made us to walk alongside, a helpmate. But we can be with others like you said, and get out of that depression, get out of that loneliness and of the disconnect with God and everything. Can we not do that?
We can, but first I want to say to you, you know, I can't imagine your loss because I'm really close to my husband. And, you know, to go through that is hard.
It's a journey.
It's got to be a journey. I have, excuse me, I have a friend, her name is Margaret, and she and her husband were married for, I want to say 66 years.
Wow.
And when Dan died, you know, I called Margaret and asked how she was doing, and she said it was really, really hard. But since that time, she's decided, you know, it is hard. I'm terribly lonely, but she lives in kind of an apartment, and she said, I started inviting the other widows and widowers over to my house, and I'd make soup, and they'd just bring bread, and I'm just loving on them, you know? And I'm just saying, hey, I know what you're going through, and you did that with your friend, and so well done.
Well, you know, though, too, Becky, I invite my grandchildren over.
Yes.
I go places with my grown 3 daughters. I try to stay in touch with people. I do the show. I speak at things. You know, I Sunday school teacher. I went on mission trips for 24 years, or 26 with Roy. We did that for 26 years. So I still stay busy. Once I got over the hump, because it takes a minute.
It does.
It takes a minute.
I mean, and you have to grieve because grieving is God's provision. And so if you just move on and you say, well, you know, I'm going to strong arm through this, that's not going to be good for your soul, because Jesus said, blessed are those who mourn. So you did that, but you didn't say, I'm going to crawl in bed and give up for the rest of my life. You know, grandchildren bring joy. Our kids bring joy.
Yes. We have
you
a
know,
lot to live
reaching
for.
out to friends. So well done.
Well, I was thinking about you. We're going to take a break in a second, but I was thinking about you being a Bible teacher. I love that, in fact, that you do that. So you encourage yourself in the Word, because I want to talk about that when we come back from break, because you went through some of these things, correct?
Yes.
Some loneliness, some
absolutely.
some despair, and you know, things that we women seem to embrace that more than the men. Sometimes I think we can get into that more, but I want to talk with you about that when we come back. So, hey, stay with us. We're going to come back. And Ginger,
I can't get a word in edgewise.
I'm sorry.
We'll be back in just a few minutes. Welcome back. We're so glad you came back to be with us. We're here with Becky Harling, who has written this book, Cultivating Deeper Connections, and it's about loneliness. And I think there are times in our lives that all of us have times that we have loneliness, and anything can trigger it at any time. It can be a separation from family, from children, even going off to college, to deaths and leaving parents, all different kinds of things. But Becky, we're so glad you're with us today.
Yes.
And I have a question. On the back of your book, it says loneliness is an epidemic, but you can live life with a deep sense of belonging. How can you do that if you're lonely? How can I feel a deep sense of belonging when I don't feel like I belong?
Yeah. I think our sense of belonging is tied directly to God. So that's where it begins. When I know that God loves me, that He offers grace to me, that I can tell God anything, you know. I mean, let's face it, some mornings you wake up and you're kneeling down before the Lord and you're like, Lord, I'm just a hot mess today, you know, but God's okay with that. And when we sense that we are deeply loved by God, that is our truest place of belonging. And then we can rise up from that place and offer to love others well so that they feel a sense of belonging, and their sense of belonging then creates more belonging for us.
Absolutely.
Well, let me ask you a question. How did writing this book help you in your relationship with others? Because I think what I have read in this book, and I hadn't read the whole thing, but I'm going to, how can it draw me into a relationship with others?
Yeah, I went through a season where my husband and I were both in ministry, and we're very busy a lot. We are very close with our kids and with our grandkids. But there was a season where I think we did 65 countries in 4 years.
Oh, wow.
And during that time, I think I wrote 4 books. So we were always like, we would come home, unpack, see the kids, hop on the next plane. And I just realized I can't keep doing that because I felt disconnected from my closest friends. You know, loneliness is not really the absence of people, it's feeling disconnected from them.
That's true.
And I really enjoyed writing this because it reminded me I love being with my girlfriends. I love being close with my husband, but we need our friends as well. You know, we need to have the friends where we can call them in the morning and just share our hearts or pray together, or we can go shopping together or sit and have coffee together. And it's deep person friendships that go beyond social media and cell phone relationships.
Yes.
Well, is social media hurting us, do you think?
Yes. I mean,
How?
I think social media serves a purpose. I am on social media. I need to be.
Yes.
But I think if that's all you're doing, it's making you more lonely. You know, I read a really funny statistic, or I heard it on the news a few months ago, that they're having a problem in New York City with people falling into manholes.
Yes.
And the reason they're falling into manholes is they're scrolling their phones, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, we need to, the whole cell phone age has brought with it a new addiction for us.
Amen.
So if we're bored, we can go on social media and scroll. The flip side of that is the more time you spend on social media, the lonelier you're going to be. So we have to do it in balance. We need parameters around it. We need boundaries. So, you know, if you want to stay in touch with your friends from high school or college or whatever, or from years ago, or with your grandkids or with your kids, you know, and you want to see updates and pictures, sure, go on social media, but make it your goal to not be on there for more than 20 minutes a day, because that's when it's becoming an addiction.
I read that if you can't go into a room without taking your phone, you're addicted.
Yep.
You know, you go to a room, I got to get my phone. Go to another room, I got to take my phone. I go to the car, I got to take my phone. I'm shopping, I got to take my phone.
Yes.
You're addicted.
Yeah.
It's plain and simple.
I have
You're
a friend
addicted.
that said that when she took all of her grandchildren out to eat,
Yes.
she carried an empty basket, and they said, "Grandmother, what is that for?" And she said, "Because everybody's going to put their cell phones in the basket, and if one person takes theirs out of the basket while we're having dinner,
Yes.
then you pay for the meal."
Yes, yes.
Oh.
I love that.
Oh, that's a good
great.
one.
Here's the table with
Yeah.
all those cell phones. And she said the grandchildren communicated more over that hour meal.
Yes.
The teenagers, the college students, they were all talking because instead their phones would buzz and they'd all look at it. You know?
Yeah.
She said
Yes.
none of them grabbed that phone.
I love that idea. What a great idea. You could do that with your friends, right? Okay, if you
Right.
take out your cell phone, you're paying for lunch.
Yeah.
Well, you want to cultivate deeper relationships
That's right.
with people, and social media does not do that.
No.
We know that. But what do you think about this, about a critical spirit? You talked about that. Tell me why you talked about a critical spirit.
Because as I was researching this whole topic of loneliness, and as I was observing people, I still travel quite a bit and do conferences, and women would say, "I'm really lonely." And so I would say, "Well, let's talk about that." And within the course of 10 minutes, they were criticizing the music at their church, criticizing their kids for how they were raising their kids, criticizing. I mean, if you're going to be that negative,
Yeah.
I don't mean to be harsh, but you're going to struggle with loneliness. And we have grown so comfortable with this whole idea of criticism here in America particularly, that we feel like we can, be the expert on everything. We've got to lay that down. We've got to be humble in friendship.
Right.
We've got to come alongside of people and offer affirmations. Listen, everybody's
just
trying
time.
as hard as they can.
Your time, just I'm here with you. Let's do things enjoyable.
Yes.
Let's don't talk about everything negative that we can think about, because sometimes that's human nature. You want to vent.
That's right.
But honestly, I'll say, okay, I'll see you next time. After that experience with them, I don't want to be around that.
Yes.
Because it doesn't do well for me. I'm a very tactile, helpful, loving person, and if you start all that, I
It was great to see you, but I'm out.
Yeah, I like
that's
you,
a good
but
thing. And I think we all can say we know someone that is negative Nelly.
yeah.
Yes.
And we need to either help them and encourage them by just giving them a compliment and then move on.
Because they may be lonely.
They may be lonely.
Which causes that, I guess. I don't know. But, I want to get back to this question, Becky. You wrote this book, okay, tells about loneliness. You went through it. I want to know about it.
I did. I love your directness. I can think of 2 times where I was really, really lonely in my life. I do tend to be a little bit more extroverted, so I love people.
Me too, yeah.
But the time where we were traveling nonstop, and I remember coming home from a trip and saying to my husband, I feel really lonely, and he looked at me like, are you nuts? We've been with thousands of people.
But you didn't have that deep connection.
Right. I said, that's true, but I have been separated from my kids for all these weeks. I've been separated from my close friends. He and we were both teaching. We were together, but we hadn't really had us time. Yeah. So feeling disconnected left me lonely. And then I'm a breast cancer survivor. And I remember when I went through the initial 6-hour surgery for that, Steve and my husband Steve and I had agreed that he would go home to be with the kids. We were still raising kids after he knew I was okay, or out of surgery at least. And I just remember that night when he got ready to leave the hospital, I was a mess. I was hooked up to so many machines, and I felt so lonely. Yeah. And I just remember reaching out to the Lord. And the great thing is, the Lord reminded me of a verse that I had learned as a little girl. Never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. And I just kept repeating it in my mind. And I realized, okay, Jesus is here in this hospital room with me right now. Yeah. I feel alone, but I am not alone.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, in the Bible, New Testament, it says, greet the brethren with a holy kiss.
Yeah, yeah.
Greet the brethren. How marvelous is that?
Yes.
Because you don't ever know that person, how lonely they are. When my children, they got married within 6 months, all of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, no, 2 of them got married, 1 left for college. I thought I was going to die. Really, I thought I was the loneliest human being in the whole wide world.
Of course, because
even though I had other things, and I have a husband, I had to get beyond that, because that's bad. And that's what I'm saying. You don't know when you hug someone at church or out, or that's why I'm a big hugger, or you kiss them on the cheek. What they're suffering, how lonely they might be, and what it does for us.
Yes.
And it does create serotonin, which is the good feeling hormone. So we have to have that. So anyway,
and when you're feeling lonely, if you invite somebody in who is feeling lonely, that actually has kind of a ricochet effect, and it helps you as well. Yes. So when you see somebody at church that feels lonely, or you think they do, invite them to your house for coffee. The true meaning of hospitality is really welcoming others.
Yes, but now tell me how we can get your book and how they can reach you. We got about 30 seconds.
Yes, you can get my book anywhere Christian books are sold, and you can find me on social media media for sure, but I love to have people visit me at my website, BeckyHarling.com, and every Monday morning I send out a free devotional if you sign up for that, so you'll know what God's doing in my life, and hopefully it resonates with you.
Thank you.
Oh, that's
I
great.
loved it.
Thank you.
I hope y'all loved
Thank
it as
you.
much
So
as I
good.
did. We're going to take a short break, and then Ginger and I will be back with you in just a moment. Thank you, Becky, for being with us.
Thank you.
Good. Welcome back. It has been a wonderful show. And
Yes.
talking about loneliness, and Sherry, you have been through this with the death of your husband recently. But so many of you out there are dealing with loneliness, and even in a busy world, we know that, especially around the holidays, loneliness can happen when you have an empty
Mammoth.
place sitting. And we just want to say, wow, God is in the middle of all of this.
Yes, He
He
is.
can be right there for you.
And it's like Becky had said, He'll never leave us.
That's right.
Nor forsake you. He loves you. Never forget that. Go to the Word. It'll help. The Psalms, read them. God bless you, and hope to see you next time. And on behalf of Ginger and I, goodbye.